Time travel is something that we all dream of, and we see it everywhere in all of our favorite fandoms, such as Futurama, Marvel, Harry Potter, Back to the Future. Everything that we love and dear talks about time travel in some way. But what is time travel? How is time travel even possible? And how do the fandoms do it to not create these paradoxes? Well, time travel itself involves the theory of relativity. And relativity means that it is possible to travel into the future without even a time machine. All you really need to do is travel at the speed of light, or speed of time in a tense gravitational field. The only problem with time travel is time itself, because time is irrelevant. There is no understanding of how time actually works. We are living in the year 2024, but 2024 years ago was year zero, and the Earth is older than that. We have BC and AD time frame. Dinosaurs lived millions of years. It's just, time is irrelevant. So in reality, we are actually living in the year 4.543 billion instead of 2024. In reality, we are actually living in the year 4.5 billion. And with that being said, it is irrelevant to time because, in Back to the Future, when he travels back to 1985, he punches in the year 1985. So in reality, that should bring him back to the actual year 1985, when the dinosaurs were still roaming the earth. That would make more sense instead of 1985 that we live in, because 1985 that we live in is not the real 1985, because time is irrelevant. Time was created by man in order to track a certain amount of time lapse and how we go about our day. And we did that by discovering, the rise and fall of the sun would be during the day, and then when the moon is out at night, rises and falls, boom, we have one full day, which is calculated to 24 hours. Again, created by man. Minutes, seconds, hours was all created not because of the universe, but because of man creating that time. And with that being said, time is irrelevant, and therefore time travel should be impossible. Going backwards in time. But it is possible to still go forward in time. We travel forward in time every day, essentially. But I mean, the only possible way to actually travel back in time, you wouldn't be able to type in coordinates such as you would with Back to the Future, or Hermione. I mean, technically Hermione is doing what this is going to say, because she's only going back a few minutes and a few period of time. If you were able to find a black hole, the theory is that if you travel fast enough through that black hole corkscrew, that corkscrew will actually travel you back into time at the speed of light. However, traveling at the speed of light could possibly kill you, so I won't recommend it. And as Bruce Banner says in Avengers, if you travel to the past becomes your future, and your former present becomes the past, which can't now be changed by your new future. And Professor Farnsworth in Futurama talks about time travel as well, and states that you can't travel back in time. You can only go forward in time. He even makes a time machine that continues to move forward in time, because if you're moving forward in time, if right now I moved 10 years into the future, I'm not detrimentally changing anything in the past that could alter the future because that future hasn't happened yet. So I'm just inputting myself into that future that hasn't happened yet. So I can't change anything because it hasn't happened yet. But if you travel back in time, you could potentially change something. Now, obviously, these can also create alter timelines, things like that. I'm not going to go too crazy into the time, Marvel time travel because it's just insane with the timelines and game and all that stuff. But it's fine. So hit that button, hit the subscribe button, and let's talk about the time travel and some of my favorite fandoms. So like I mentioned before, Futurama, Professor Fontour creates a time machine that moves forward in time, and time repeats itself. When he gets to the end of the universe collapses into smaller particles, Big Bang happens once again, and everything starts over and repeats itself almost to a T. He says that this universe is a couple inches lower, so it's not exact, but history repeats itself, and he can continue to move forward and go through this time change over and over and over and over again, and everything happens exactly the same. So you could say that time is really irrelevant, and no matter what you do, forward or backwards, you can't change the past because everything's gonna just repeat itself no matter what you do. We're just set on a fixed timeline. Also, in Futurama, Bender's big score, he has the time code, which allows him to travel back into time, but there is a paradoxical fixing mechanism with it. Basically, if Phi travels back into time and then there's another Phi, one Phi is going to be destroyed no matter what, by some kind of accident or whatever, because it's the paradox correcting mechanism. Because you can't have two Phis, so the universe corrects itself by killing one of them. So that fixes the paradoxes there in Futurama. Futurama, obviously, time travel was in the first episode. One Phi gets frozen and travels 1,000 years into the future. Like I said, moving forward in time relatively makes sense. Traveling back in time to a certain time frame does not, because time is relevant. Time does not exist. Time is created. You can't set back, I want to go back to a certain date. It just doesn't work that way. If you were to travel back in time, if we were to figure out how a black hole works and we're able to use that to travel at the speed of light without ripping our bodies apart, yes, we could potentially travel back into time. However, it's not a set thing. For I know, the black hole may send you back 1,000 years, from us. It may send you back 5 minutes. There's just no way to tell what it actually will do, because it's just a theory, and there's no way to actually calculate or set a determined destination. In theory, if we could create a black hole that we can contain and use to travel back into time, if that's what it actually would be able to do, there's no way to set an actual date, because time is irrelevant. I'm going to say that a lot. So we have Futurama, very simplistic, moving forward one way, and if you do travel back into time, there's a paradox correcting system where basically you can't alter the timeline. And then we have shows like, not shows, but movies like Back to the Future, where they have 1885 to 2015, and then we also have 1955 and 1985. Now this is the 1985 is, you know, the core of the story. That's where it takes place. Then Marty McFly travels back into 1955. Does some things, possibly changing the future, because in the present day, Biff is kind of a bully to his father still, and because he goes back in time and changes some things in the past, his father punches Biff, and now Biff basically listens to him. So he already created a new timeline for 1985. So he split off that timeline. So there's still a timeline where this exists. And in this timeline, in the original timeline, where he first goes back to 1955, the Doc actually does die. The Doc actually gets shot and does not continue the research, because that Marty never returns, because he doesn't come back, because that Marty is now in a new timeline. So the Marty of this timeline did go back, but he's not coming back because the other Marty replaced him. So this Doc listened to Marty in the past and wore the bulletproof vest and survives. So they continue the research, and Doc goes to 2015. Then Marty goes to 2015. Then we have Biff stealing the almanac, traveling back to before 1955, creating an alternate timeline when he turns 21. Let me do it this way. Creates another alternate timeline where Biff kills Marty's dad, forces Lorraine to marry him, is this big rich entrepreneur that basically owns the whole city. So when Biff comes back from giving his past self the almanac, he drops the DeLorean off back in 2015. Then Marty and Doc leave and happen to go to this version of 1985 that Biff created. So then they need to travel back to 1955 and get the almanac away from Biff before he makes the bet, in order to go back to this timeline that he first created in the first film by going back in time with his parents in high school. And then there's the third film, where obviously we see a tombstone of Doc. And this is what I don't get. I mean, they find a tombstone of Doc, but it's like, yeah, if you're living in the past and you stayed in the past, you're gonna die eventually. Either way. So Doc gets transported to 1885. Then Marty from 1955 goes back to try to save the Doc, because the Doc that went back is this Doc And then Marty meets up with the Doc that's still in this timeline to go back to save his future self. And not much history is changed in this. The only thing is, Marty talks about the ravine and how the lady puts down a ravine, but she doesn't. So now the ravine name is different. So he basically altered one page in history. And then Marty goes back to 1985, continues on his story, where Doc and the other lady just travel through time and do their own thing. Kind of like a Time Lord. Doc Brown becomes new doctor. And then also, when Marty goes back with his girlfriend and they go on a trip, Marty gets caught up in a drag race and decides not to do it, and the other vehicle almost gets to that car, and that would have been Marty if he did the race. And then his girlfriend has a piece of paper that says fired on it, and then it gets erased because the future hasn't been written yet. So therefore you can't rely on it. Like, moving forward relatively, like I said before, you can't change the future from your present. You could potentially go backwards and change the past, but obviously we have paradoxical fixing mechanisms in our own life to create those things. Or instead of a paradox correcting system, you just create a new timeline, which basically would explain the hoax thing as well. When you go back in time and you change something, you create a new present for yourself, and that present becomes your pet. So it's basically saying creating yourself a brand new timeline. Now in Harry Potter, Hermione has the time turner, and it's the only instance where we would see a time turner actually being used. Not talking about Cursed Child, okay? Because in order to go back that much time, you gotta turn that thing like 1,000, whatever. Because Hermione turns it like 3 times and goes back 3 hours. So each time you turn it is only an hour. So, not talking about Cursed Child, just talking about the original 7 books. Hermione used a time turner to take multiple classes and travel back in the time. It said that she can't see her other self because it could potentially, do some damages. Like she says to Harry, when Harry wants to run in there and basically get scabbard before he causes any damage. First of all, Hermione basically explains that no, you can't do that because that didn't happen. And you can't go bursting in there. You would think you've gone mad seeing yourself, because that past person that you are basically doesn't know that you can time travel. So you seeing yourself walk in the door, you're gonna freak the hell out. Some wizards have killed themselves because of that situation. So if the person in the future kills the person in the past, then you just don't exist at all. So, with Hermione, time travel's a little different. She basically says the same thing, like you can't do certain things because that didn't happen. So basically you have to abide by certain laws and certain rules. Time is relative. It moves in a straight line, moves straight forward. So going back a few moments, you're not going to alter anything, because what happened is what happened. You can't change that. Basically, when they travel back in time, all they're doing is observing everything that's going on until waiting for the right moment when they can save Sirius and Buckbeak. So when Hermione goes to, let's say, Defense Against Dark Arts class at 12 o'clock, then she uses a time turner to go back like 20 minutes. She goes back like maybe 20 minutes. Now, in 20 minutes, Hermione, Ron, and Harry are going to walk to the DAD castle. She's standing there right now, 20 minutes in the past. She needs to sneak somewhere around the castle. Oh, sorry, wrong thing. She needs to sneak somewhere around the castle and go to 12 o'clock. Ancient ruins, or whatever it may be. Before her other self sees her. So the issue with the time turner is it is a consistent loop, back and forth, back and forth. And there's no creating alternate timelines because we don't really see it happen. But if she has 3 classes at the same time, which her schedule does show that she has 3 classes in like the same time frame, she needs to go to ancient ruins, then use a time turner to go back and travel to a divination, let's say, and then she needs to use a time turner to go back and be in arithmancy, let's just say. So now she's in 3 places at once. There are 3 Hermiones in the school at this exact time. So the first one used a time turner to go back to this one. She took that class, and then after the class she went an additional time frame back to do arithmancy, took that class, then she went an additional time back because she still has to go back and take ancient ruins. In order to make that work, yes, you have to take the class, travel back in time, do that, take the class, travel back in time, do that. In order to keep up appearances, she needs to, be there. She can't just disappear before the class, which does happen, and she finds out that she forgot to go back to the class. So if she goes to the door of ancient ruins, sets a time turner to set for divination, take the class, go back to the time turner, set the divination for arithmancy, take the class, then go back to ancient ruins and walk through the door. She walks in the hallway, her past self flips the switch and she goes in. Boom, she hit all 3 classes perfectly fine, didn't change anything. So no matter what she does, it's just a constant loop, back and forth, back and forth. When they're saving Sirius and Buckbeak, it's a constant motion moving forward. Yes, they travel back in the time, but time is relatively moving forward in a consistency that stays even. So Hermione has to stay on course. She travels back a certain time frame, but she needs to either stay out of the way and be very cautious to not change anything, because you can't. The laws of magic say that you basically can't change time whatever happens, happens, and whatever did happen is going to happen. However, it is a possibility that what we saw in Prison of Azkaban, where, you know, everything happens the first part before Harry went with the time turner, there is a possibility that if Harry actually did go into Hagrid's shack and grab Scabbards and somehow was able to explain away, and Harry is just like, yeah, you're from the future, cool, I understand completely. You could potentially create an alternate timeline in Harry Potter. That's the only other way I can think about it, you know, just creating an alternate timeline. Because as we know from the TVA, the Sacred Timeline has branches coming off of it. And each of those branches have other branches coming off of it. Because everything is just, you know, different things happen and create these new branches. I'm definitely not getting into like the whole Marvel time travel thing, because that's just crazy convoluted. Oh yeah, one more thing. Time travel in Donnie Darko. There are 2 timelines within that film of Donnie Darko. You have timeline 1 and timeline 2. Timeline 1 is the beginning of the film. And the end of the film. Basically, in the beginning of the film, when Donnie decides to leave the house before the plane engine crashes, he then splits off and connects to timeline 2, where the entire movie takes place, where he talks about time travel with the old lady who likes to check her mailbox, who he sees the hallucinations of Frank the Rabbit. All that happens in timeline 2. And then he ends up, you know, his girlfriend ends up getting killed. He ends up shooting Frank the Rabbit, who at the time isn't a hallucination, it's the actual Frank the Rabbit. And then he realizes that basically, because he wasn't killed in that engine crashing in the beginning of the film, he altered the timeline. He killed an innocent person and killed someone that he enjoyed being with. So he used his time travel powers to take his mother and his sister's plane crash here to go to the end of the film, which is actually the beginning of the film. So he uses time travel powers that he was able to acquire by studying it and learning about it throughout timeline 2, takes that plane engine from the plane that his mother and sister are on in timeline 2. So those timeline 2 mother and sister are perfectly fine. They're still alive. Not in that timeline, but they're still alive because they're alive in timeline 1. So that plane engine gets transferred back to the beginning in timeline 1, and we see Donnie Darko laughing because he knows he's going to die. He knows what he did, so he travels back in time himself, back to the beginning of the film, and stays there while the plane engine crashes, creating this new timeline of timeline 1, where his family moves on and everybody survives. Frank the Rabbit doesn't die. and his mother and sister don't die in a plane crash later on. Just Donnie himself is dead. And that's how time travel works in that movie. He created a new timeline and then figured out how to control time and went back and corrected it and basically eliminated the second timeline altogether to make this the quote-unquote sacred timeline of the story. That was a lot. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Check out the links down below. I have a Patreon page where you can check out a bunch of content just for you, and it helps me with the YouTube fluctuation ad revenue. Also, while you're down there, hit that join button. Check out the merch store. I got a ton of awesome merch and new designs coming. Also, let me know your thoughts on time travel. What's your favorite use of time travel within a fandom? It could be either, your favorite use of it, in a good way, or your favorite use of it in a bad way. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Before you go, check out that video. Check out that video and that video, and I'll see you guys next time.